Hey, practice owners, welcome back to another edition of Coming Back Stronger. I'm very excited to have our guest, Colin Receveur, on today. Colin is from SmartBox Dental, and I got this in the mail. I think a lot of you probably did. The Practice Growth magazine comes from Colin. I've known him for a long time. He's a pretty smart guy. In fact, I've known Colin's dad for a few years. He's an even smarter guy, so you can make sure you share that with Ron. But Colin does a lot of, we bounce ideas off of each other from time to time, and he was one of the first guys I thought of when we came up with the idea of Coming Back Stronger, to find tactical things you can do now. He's sort of an action guy. So there are people who talk way up here and do this with your marketing, and it's a very 30,000-foot view. But one of the things I appreciate about Colin is it's very hands-on, tactical things you can, instead of sitting, as soon as you're done, go do them right now. And so I asked him to be on. So Colin, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on here, Steve. Excited.
Like you're quarantining well, it looks like.
Trying to do my best. Yeah, we ran out of razors, and I can't seem to find any more. So this is what we're stuck with.
It's not worth going to the grocery, so just let it go.
Just let it go. Yep. That's like Disney's. What was that Disney movie? Let it go, let it go. Yep.
Yes. So just let it go, let it go. I've had some people tell me that they've made a commitment to not shave until the first day back to work. So on the day they go back to their practice, they're going to shave it all off.
I'm not sure if I can make that commitment.
I can't either. So,
yeah.
Well, we talked ahead of time about some things that you do, and so suddenly you had an awesome list, and I want to kind of go through those if we can.
Sure.
For practice owners who, the foundation of this is what you can be doing now. You can be binge watching Game of Thrones and waiting to get a text message from the president or governor or whoever that says, hey, crisis passed, everybody go back to work Monday, which is not going to happen. Or you could be doing what you're doing now, watching this and figuring out ways to work on your practice while you can't work in your practice. Mm-hmm. And you had a few items that were really sort of spot on, and I wanted to explore those a little bit. One of them was this idea of pent-up demand. Mm-hmm. And I think you and I agree with that. Whatever day we come back, we'll call it, day one back, whatever day that might be. It could be next week, could be next month. It could be, 32 days or 17 days. We don't know, and we don't need to know that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there is this pent-up demand that's happening that you can sort of address now or get ready to address. So can you expand a little bit on that, what you mean by pent-up demand?
Yeah, so as I've been talking to doctors over the past month, the theme that keeps coming back up is when I open my doors back up, I'm going to have all these patients on the calendar. We're going to have all this work that needs done. And largely what I'm going to suggest is that pent up demand, as it's been termed, does not exist. And it doesn't exist for a few reasons. First off, it doesn't exist because most of the incidents, the situations where the practices have closed, they closed in a pre-COVID world, mm-hmm. and they're opening in a post-COVID world. And this virus is going to change the world the same way 9/11 did. To mm-hmm. think that after 9/11, you're going to stroll through TSA with your shoes and jacket on and probably have a knife in your pocket, and they don't even care we would look at that and think that's crazy these days. Mm-hmm. They take little paring knives away from little old grandmas now. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the same situation that occurs where patients are not going to just stroll back into the practice. Think about how are you handling the reappointments of all these cancellations? And what is that reappoint strategy? How are you going to ensure that all these patients on your calendar attend their appointments that are already booked? Mm-hmm. How are you positioning? Hygiene is going to take the biggest hit. It always does. It took the biggest hit in in the H1N1 outbreak. It took the biggest hit during the 2008 recession. It took the biggest hit under the HIV scare back in the 90s. How is a practice going to prioritize their larger unscheduled treatment or go direct to the market for restorative to offset the profit that they're going to need to generate, right? A lot of practices I've been talking to, they get a lot of their restorative ascended through hygiene. Well, if hygiene is going to be in the you know what, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to shore up our schedules, our restorative side, to ensure that we don't show up and we walk in the door and we go, where is everybody? Where's all my patients at? There's going to be a significant amount of patient churn that occurs. Patients just aren't going to come back. Good people. But if 12 months means you're inactive, there's going to be a lot of patients that go inactive. So I just think there's a whole lot of considerations here that a lot of practices haven't looked at, or they've made false assumptions. I know a lot of practices have no idea what their cash burn is currently.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We talked about that a little bit a few minutes ago, Steve.
Yep.
Most practices, when we intake a client, 91%, we have 5 metrics that we look at in a practice. There's only 5. And 91% of the practices we intake can only name one of them. You know what that one is? You want to guess?
Production.
What's that?
Production or production collections?
Well, sometimes that one. They always seem to know their restorative case acceptance percentage.
Ah, okay.
The doctors always know how well they're doing. And by and large, generally, case acceptance from the doctors is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea on the rest of it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think 2020 is going to be the year that doctors stop working in the practice so much and they start working on the practice.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're here in this situation, and it's kind of forcing that hand. But I think this is going to be the year that the average practice is not going to exist in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
The practices that were below average are just going to go out of business. That's how I'm looking at that. It's unfortunate, but that's what I'm seeing in the marketplace right now.
I think you're right, and I think it's an evolution, and this is just this is the spot that where it's whether it's dropping off a cliff or what have you. But I think it's something that's been happening for a couple of decades. Mm-hmm. I think that, you could be a practice owner, of which, 8.5 out of 10 practice owners are dentists who went to dental school and, suddenly were entrepreneurs, and they don't know what that means. And it was easy enough to say, I don't know, taxes, hiring and firing and cash flow and cash burn. What does all that mean? And conflict, and my office manager stole from me. All that stuff could happen, and you could still be pretty profitable and have a pretty good life out of that. And along comes things like a recession, 2007, 8, 9. Along comes things like dental insurance. I mean, dental insurance. You know how many fee for service? Colin, do you remember here's your strategy: only do cosmetic dentistry, work 2 days or 3 days a week, and make 5 times as much as you could seeing regular patients. I mean, how many seminars and, accreditations and all this junk that would happen. Nobody remembers that today. And, the guys who were doing that are now, seeing regular patients. They're bread and butter dentists. So
it's a cosmetic dentist.
Yeah. The economy changed that. An external force changed that. You didn't have that choice. It came down and sort of, took the wind out of your sails. So I think you're right. You're reaching a point now where docs who are that stuff is so far outside of their comfort zone. They've never wanted to deal with it, and now they have to. Mm-hmm. They've never had to worry about PPP loans and EIDL loans, and should I take it, and how should I time it? When should I start taking it? When am I going to run out of money? Should I bring people back? Yep. These are all business decisions. They don't have anything to do with the patient. So I think you're right. I think a lot of people just throw their hands up and go.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I remember looking at practices back in January and February, and there were a couple that stand out that had 35 or 40 or 45% of their collections were labor. And I said, there's a big opportunity here for you to identify your A players, reduce your labor, and really get this thing lean and mean. And by the way, probably add 10 or 15% to your take home profit at the same time. And then March hit, and yeah, it was exponentially more difficult for those practices that did not have tight controls around the people and around the practice side of their business. They've had a much more difficult time than those that had lean ships that were running prior to the outbreak, generally accepted early mid-March timeline. One of the things we're talking to our doctors about is don't bring all your people back. This is a perfect opportunity to identify your A players and bring them back profitably. The paradox of hiring is that you can probably sympathize with this, Steve. Have you ever had an employee tell you, we have too many people and I don't need more help?
Right. Usually it's, I'm covered up and we need to hire 3 more people here at the front desk.
And that's, every employee says that. And that's right. That is the curse, because and really what they're saying, when you have people come to you and say, we're covered up, we need more help, that rhymes. What they're really telling you is, we don't have any good leadership right now. We have a lack of leadership in this company. And it's a lack of leadership issue because either the staff is doing a bunch of stuff they don't need to be doing, and they think they're busy, but they're really not. They're definitely probably not doing what the doctor thinks they should be doing, but they don't know any better. So here it is, kind of to break this down. No team member has ever said, I want to wake up this morning and I want to go to work and I want to just do a crappy job for this guy that I work for that provides for me and gives me a paycheck. Now, maybe there's a couple toxic people that we've come across in our lifetimes that say that, right? But they're out the door pretty quick.
Yeah.
Your team largely comes in and does the best job they know how to do. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, then we need to coach them up or coach them out, right? And that's all leadership functions. So if we have a situation where there's 35 or 40 or 45%, ideally, Steve, I'd like to see practices at 25%. Okay. We've got some practices that are in the high teens, and they're super, super lean and mean. It depends on business model and all this stuff. But when you see practices that are up in the 30s and 40s, and I've seen some approaching 50%, they're getting sold by their team on how many people they think they need. And it comes down to, we just had a great opportunity to reset, evaluate who our A players are, and now let's go through a hiring process. There's going to be a lot of A players available. Let's put in place a great hiring process to hire A players back, and put some caps in place, some circuit breakers, so we don't overhire in the future. And we figure out how to do this thing and do it highly, highly profitably in a way where A players can be retained. A lot of practices have so much labor overhead, they can't afford to comp their A players what they're worth. So they move on to another practice that's running lean enough to pay them more. It's a very common thing. So this opportunity, I know this is let's just cut through the double talk. This is a shit time.
Right.
But this is also an opportunity to look at what has been going on in your practice and start to figure out, how am I going to do this? How am I going to play better in the second half than I did in the first? The first half is over. We can't change what's happened.
Right.
Practices are going to open up in May or June or July. And we got the second half of the year. If this is a basketball game, there's still plenty of time to win the game. And the numbers work out. If you can increase your collections 15 to 20% for 4 to 6 months, you can roughly make the same profit you did this year as you did last year.
So even with that hole in your momentum, you think if I'm a practice owner and I've been sitting idle and I'm looking at my whatever reserve I did have drop, and suddenly I'm thinking about how I ramp this thing back up. You're confident that I could come back and make what I did last year with that big hole in the middle of my production.
We've done budgets for a bunch of our clients that have done just that. Now there's several components here. You've got to pick up the business end of the stick and swing it, right? That's what this requires. Expenses, labor, and pulling all these levers as most practices don't even have a budget.
Right.
A financial budget that's any different. Listen, a budget is not, I built January and copied it 11 more times.
Right.
That's not a budget, right? 98% of practices don't even have budgets. So when you're talking about what levers do I pull and how do I look at all these past dues and then collections and future production and past production and expenses, fixed versus variable, most times when I'm helping a client with a budget, it's very ground level and we're building that foundation in place. But a practice that is not sitting still, this virus is kind of like a hurricane, Steve. If you have a house on the beach in Florida and there's a hurricane coming, there's a lot of dentists out there that are just still sitting on their front porch.
Right.
And that's pretty scary. The hurricane's about to bear down on them, and they're still putting on sunscreen and suntan lotion. And that's really dangerous. The practices that are out there taking action and figuring this stuff out, Warren Buffett had a great quote. Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked. And when this thing opens back up here in 2, 4, 6 weeks, the tide's going to go out and we're going to see who's been swimming naked for the past 2 months.
I think you
that's
also
the message I've delivered to all of our people.
Yeah. So back, you're right. There are a lot of docs who are sitting on the front porch. And I think, you and I have talked before, I speak a lot on mindsets, the dentist mindset and the practice owner mindset. And I think a lot of dentists are sitting on the front porch waiting to do what they've been trained to do. They find out all the parameters and the guardrails and the guidelines, and then they build a protocol, and that's what they do. But they start with having that framework. And on the business side, especially now, there isn't a framework. There literally is. Think about it this way. This occurred to me the other day. There literally isn't a business model who's been through this kind of a situation, literally shutting down an economy. There are the experts that are out there. I don't know I'd like to find an expert who has lived through this enough to say, okay, I'm an expert because I've got the experience to tell you how these things play out. They don't exist. So dentists have that sort of mindset where they have to have all that ready before they jump. And in this case, I think you just have to have the belief that you can do it, have a plan and dive into it. But don't be sitting on the porch waiting for everything to line up. Don't be sitting there waiting and saying, okay, when's the hurricane going to hit? How strong is it going to be? How long is it going to last? How many, so if it's going to start in an hour and the winds are 68 miles an hour and it's going to, blow for 20 minutes, I'll just hang out here. But if if the winds are 180 miles an hour and it's going to go for 3 hours, I better pack my crap and go. And you don't have that luxury right now. You've got to be acting now, I guess is what you're saying.
That's kind of linear decision making. If then this, and then we go if then this, and then if then, and when you make decisions and you're basically saying I'm unable or unwilling to reverse course. A lot of dentists only take decisions forward one step at a time. And they only have one thing they're focused on because they're drawing the box, like you said. We're in a scenario now where we need to be moving forward in parallel. We need to have the windows battened down. We need to make sure the sump pump has a battery generator backup. We need to have the car packed up. And then after we get that stuff done, it's okay to sit on the front porch and have a glass of lemonade, right? Because we've handled all the other situations that could happen, and we're okay. But right now, the problem is none of that other stuff is done. And we're in a situation where there's not being decisions made. And it's the problem, Steve, the problem is not the virus. The problem is not Wall Street's reaction to the virus and the stock market crash. The problem is not the mandatory stay-at-home orders. The problem is not that businesses have been mandated closed. All those things are predicaments. It's a hurricane. The hurricane is going to do what the hurricane's going to do. And if you focus on the predicament, you lose the ability to control what you can do. Let's answer the questions we can control. How am I going to stabilize my business to survive this storm? How am I going to slingshot out of this thing when I open back up? What am I going to do to make sure that I have the dry powder on the sidelines to sustain this storm? Let me ask you this, Steve. If you've got a plan and you think your plan is going to say, okay, I'm going to burn $25,000 a month in cash, and this thing's going to last for 3 months, and then we're going to come out of it and it's going to be great. And you've made that decision. Well, Steve, what if this goes for 6 months?
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that it is. What I am suggesting is that maybe there's other things you need to adjust in your plan so that you don't burn all the cash on the sidelines you have. And then in 3 months you go, oh, shoot, right? So what could possibly happen? And how are we going to figure out how to get through this? Because there are no experts. But there are those that have the business experience to put in place the systems and processes to weather the storm. Nobody's been through this exact scenario, but it's like, here's a great analogy for that, Steve. Rudy Giuliani. Everybody think what you will of Rudy now. I'm putting that aside. I want to go back to September 11, 2001. Rudy Giuliani is the mayor of New York. And they had an unprecedented response to the terror attacks, to the Twin Towers. Rudy and his administration were largely credited with saving tens of thousands of lives after the attacks because of their overwhelming response. And Rudy was interviewed later. Have you heard this story?
No, but I like where it's going.
Story. Rudy was interviewed later, and they said, Rudy, how did you launch a response that was that thorough and that rigorous and all-encompassing, and you did it literally pivoting, I mean, like Michael Jordan pivoting at the free throw. I mean, just boom, and shot goes up and it goes in, right? And Rudy said, well, down at City Hall, we have a war room. And in the war room, we had plans for poison in the water, bombs in the subway. A dirty bomb goes off in the harbor and spreads nuclear waste over the city. We have plans for buildings on fire that we, like tall buildings. And they had 65 different catastrophic scenarios. And he said, but we didn't have a plan for a 737 flying into the side of the Twin Towers and subsequently collapsing. We had no idea that was going to happen, but we had plans for everything else. So we went in there and we pulled this playbook and this playbook and this playbook, and we stuck them together, and we had a plan. So the thing I tell our docs is the value in planning is rarely in the plan you create. The value in planning and going through these cash burn and all these exercises is you understand your resources, your consumptions, and your assumptions. We all make a lot of assumptions. I'm making an assumption right now the ceiling's not going to fall on me. I mean, right? That sounds dumb, but it's the truth.
Sure.
We make assumptions every day, but what are we assuming that is going to kill us, is going to crawl up and bite us in our rear? And that's what Rudy did. They built a plan based on just knowledge of how they built the other plans. And, the rest is history.
Just going through that exercise, the exercise of contingency planning, is a pretty good behavior trait, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, pretty good behavior trait to have, so that when now you've got number 66, your team already has the sort of, I don't know, I'm using a lot of metaphors, muscle memory to come up with what to do to respond really quickly. And I think that a lot of practice owners right now get stuck, they're paralyzed by waiting to know, or to some degree, this is don't get into a political argument, but a lot of blaming of, here's who didn't see this, or none of that matters. You can do that afterwards. But, if we don't focus on what we need to focus on now to move forward, there is no after. So what are some tools? So I happen to agree with you. I think you can come back as a practice owner. First of all, I think you can always come back stronger. I think you can use situations like this to do exactly what you said. Thin the herd a little bit, focus on who actually is delivering for you and who steps up when you need them to step up, who is forward looking and keeps the practice moving forward. Outsiders, coaches and consultants. And at the end of the day, that's bringing in skill sets you don't have, which I'm a big believer in. And then that you can end up this year better than last year. There are going to be unique opportunities. So, and you're I know you're one of your sort of buzzwords is about thriving. And I think that is probably what you're saying here. Rather than just surviving, rather than just making it through and saying, oh, thank goodness we got through this, you are you're a guy that looks for opportunities to do better, not just make it through, but to do better, sort of thrive. So what are some tools that somebody listening that says, okay, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. I believe you. What are some tools they can use to not just get through, but really come out better, come back stronger, to thrive on the other side and get some momentum going into 2021 that they may not have had otherwise?
Yeah. So I think there's very few practices right now that are hunkered down in survival mode.
Okay.
And are thinking to themselves, I don't want to come out the other side and thrive.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody that is trying to survive this only to come out the other side and it to be bad, continue being bad. The exercise of how do we survive this and then how do we ramp up out of this is only relevant if you're planning on thriving in the future. If you're not planning on thriving in the future, you might as well throw in the towel now, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Balancing these two things. So, what do you need to be doing to thrive? There's 10 questions that I'm asking our doctors right now.
Okay.
Do you want me to go through all 10 of them, or do you want me to email them to you?
Email me. We'll share this, and we'll also share a link. But I think if you can cover just sort of the general idea.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the exercise of exploring is good for somebody listening. Just these are things you probably ought to think of on your own.
Definitely. So we've got a couple white papers we've put out, lessons from the 2008 recession.
Okay.
And then the myth of pent up demand.
Okay.
And these are two reports that, here, I'll show you that. We'll go through the one of them here real quick.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Can you share your screen? I know is that something you can do? Awesome.
Yeah, here we go. So the myth of pent up demand, this report, I'm going to show you how to get it here in a little while, in a few minutes.
Okay.
This is all about where I see this situation evolving to. The bad part of this COVID crisis, and we've seen this happen now in 5 other countries around the world, is re-outbreaks, hotspots,
right.
Localized hotspots that flare back up. As much as I hate to say it, the government has gone to these stay-at-home protective orders, and that dam has been broken. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to use this stuff again. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we're just going to come out of this and there's going to be pent-up demand and then everything's going to be great, I would suggest is highly unlikely to happen.
Okay.
These 10 questions that I'll send you are going to outline how I'm thinking about the changes post-COVID-19 and how your patients are thinking about these changes post-COVID-19. You can get the 10 questions with the report too, so it'll all be a package deal. What we found in the 2008 recession was that those practices that did not prepare for the upswing had 38% lower revenues for 6 months longer. The cohort that we analyzed from the 2008 to 2009, the big crash that happened in there. So those practices that take this opportunity right now to answer these 10 questions, to consider there might be other future possibilities, not think linearly, but think in parallel. What are all the possible outcomes? How are we going to weight this from least to most likely? And then how can I prepare for all of these? I don't know that somebody's going to fly a plane into my building, but I do know that there's all these other bad things that can happen. And the power of being a business owner is that you can kind of peek around the corner a little bit, right? If you can just kind of see around the corner and see what's going to come at you, you can avoid a lot of problems that are going to occur. Oftentimes what I find is that our dentists are so consumed with doing the dentistry. I mean, they became a dentist because they love it, right?
Right.
And they're so into the clinical day-to-day, and it's, I mean, it just is. They're an owner-operator. And that operation side of being the clinician consumes a lot of their time. And oftentimes it compromises the owner hat that they need to be wearing, right? They wear the operator hat a little bit too much. And what happens is then, you know, things start to get wobble and the team issues. And, you know, when we're looking at practices, there's three big things we look at. There's the practice, the people, and the patients. And largely when we're diagnosing a practice, if they're not getting the right kinds of patients, you know, they're going to have holes in the schedule and high patient churn. If they've got great people and they got great patients, but they don't have the practice business fundamentals, generally there's poor profits and not enough cash. Right. I frequently hear from practices that don't have solid business fundamentals. They say things like, I just need more new patients. And that's rarely the case. Or they've got great patients and a great practice, but they got people issues. And there's low performance, there's drama type stuff going on. And, you know, that doesn't work either. And the magic is when you can get these three bubbles overlapping. And yeah, I know that's a little bit off course from where we're talking about here, but the pent-up demand, this is hopefully an eye-opener for some guys that maybe haven't considered, because there are no experts, what potential futures could look like. It's kind of like a sci-fi movie with multiple realities. What do we need to do to make sure that no matter what reality happens, we're going to thrive in it?
Well, you and I have been in this long enough to know that is, and I was looking at your at the diagram, and I always smile when I see I need more new patients. Yeah. That, Colin, that is, I mean, how many times do you hear that? I'm struggling. I can't pay the bills. I'm paying payroll on credit cards or whatever it might be. And so the answer is I need a lot of new patients. I need them now. And I don't know where that comes from. I think it comes from, it's sort of a simple thing. I see a lot of patients. So one of the things I always ask is, you know, you've got a practice that is, you're slammed. There are no more holes in your schedule. What are 25 new patients going to do for you? You're already inefficient. It may not be that you don't have enough patients. It may be that you have too many patients and too many of the wrong kind of patients. And that is not in the mindset of somebody who goes back to, they fall back on dental school to fix that. It's just see more patients, therefore I must end up better. When in fact, a lot of times it's the opposite.
Yeah. Many times.
So no, new patients don't help you at all. And they're expensive. And as you said, you know, they may, you know, if that's your strategy, 6 weeks from now, and you say, oh, thank goodness we're back. I ran through my PPP money. I need these 5 staff members on staff to see the patients I have. and I need a bunch of new patients.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you're doomed to failure right there.
Yeah, that's going to be a really tough situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I did a couple webinars on PPP and the balancing between rehire, reopen, and the 8-week forgiveness period, and the whole strategy around that stuff. You know, there were some big hitters in the dental accounting space that came out with advice that said, don't take the PPP money.
Right.
And
yeah.
I thought that was, I understand why they're saying it. I just strongly disagreed with it. Okay. And it's okay. We can agree to disagree, and we can both go about our ways. I think a 1% loan for 2 years is a gift.
Right.
And regardless of whether you don't even spend it, and it's just a cash cushion, $100,000 for 2 years costs you $2,000. And if you think you might need it, it's right there, and it's a gift. I think purely from that perspective, hopefully Congress refunds it, but you know, it's run out, and I hope they refund it, and I hope the dentist and small businesses in general that need it get access to that stuff.
But also to use it wisely. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I've been on those same calls where you're burning it up, burning through it. And in fact, it's funny, I said the exact same thing. Number one, I don't know what the downside of taking it is. If you take it, you don't like it, you know, give it back in 8 weeks and just say, you know, it cost me nothing. Or if you want some cushion in case there is a return spike, stick it in the bank. You know, what does it cost you? 1%? I don't even know. Do CDs pay 1%? You might be able to make money on these, on that kind of money. I don't know. And that's a little deeper than this conversation. But as a finance guy, that's exactly what I would say. I'm borrowing money from the government at 1%. I don't know, buy some CDs that are 1.5%, and I'm literally making money on this free money. So I'm with you. Take it right now, even if you don't know how you're going to use it, but just to have it, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, 6 more weeks, 8 more weeks. We don't know if we'll be back in 3 weeks and back out again in 9 weeks. We don't know. So
this
lay in
off again
strategies.
This on again, off again thing is very likely to happen. And how do we maximize the time that we're open to ensure that we're able to carry ourselves during the time we're not? You know, I think there's probably a second round of funding coming. I think there's probably a third round of funding coming. There's probably not a 13th round of funding coming. And eventually, we all kind of got to put on our big boy pants, and they're going to say, okay, you got to fend for yourselves. And as much as I hate to say it, I think once the big boys get bailed out, the airlines, the hotels, the hospitals, the local municipalities, I think small business is going to be last to eat at the table. Now, they got this nice round of funding here right up front, but if you look at who actually got the money, it was a bunch of big hotel chains and Ruth's Chris Steakhouse chains that, you know, I saw one of the recipients, they gave like $37 million to some college that had $14 billion in an endowment. They got $14 billion sitting in a bank account, and yet they needed $40 million to carry them through this time. That's just ridiculous. But that's what happened. And I think once those that have the lobbyists get what they've been lobbying for, the money's going to dry up. And I'm a proponent of get it while you can.
And use it, you know, again, use it wisely. So if somebody who's listening, what are maybe a couple little things? And I know you have a lot of clients, a lot of dentist clients. What are some tactical things you're telling them right now to do, you know, hands-on, that will, I think also, Colin, I think there's the functional aspect of this, things I can be doing. And then there's also the emotional aspect of it, which is I need to be doing something. And so let's make it productive. Something doesn't need to be, you know, I tell people when they call and they're upset and it's very real, the stress and the anxiety, The first thing I say is you're not going to find the answer on CNN or Fox News. So right now, turn that off. And I tell them, I remember when I started out in business, I got the Wall Street Journal. I used to read 3 newspapers every morning. I'm going to date myself. And, I would just spread them out, and each one had its little things. I always liked the Wall Street Journal had these 2 columns down the front page, and I would just scan those columns, and it would tell me about 3 or 4 articles that I wanted. And, I would find those. So I got everything I needed. And then that got turned off. And my next news bite might be noon if I listened to it on the radio and I happen to be in the car, or when I got home and turned the news on. Yep. But in between, I just got to work. Yep. Well, today, people turn on. I keep looking at my little TV here that's off by design. It's turned off. Yeah. It will eat you alive if you go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And I think people get drawn into that, trying to figure out what's going to happen. So that's part of the answer is you won't find it on CNN or Fox News. Turn those off. So what are some things they can do that are real nuts and boltsy?
Nuts and boltsy. This is a great time to be figuring out who on your team is going to be with you when you reopen.
Okay.
A players versus B players. Most people don't have C players on their team.
Okay.
Largely. There might be 1 or 2 here or there, but usually if you have C players, they've already been fired. Most people have teams of B players, and figuring out the A's versus the B's and taking this time to leverage them up is critical. And it's not just now, it's anytime you're slow. 4th of July, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Labor Day, Memorial Day, you pick the holidays. That's a great time. Instead of giving the team directions to deep clean the office for the 3rd time this year, why don't we level up the team and hire a cleaning staff if we need that? Figure out, how are we going to evaluate our people? What's the criteria? Is there a strategy around this? What's the ultimate outcome we want to create? We've got some very tactical tools around our Success Academy and our money funnel that we use to evaluate people. I don't know if your viewers would appreciate some of that stuff. I'm happy to share some of that stuff with them.
I think they would. Absolutely. I think it's something that you can, post conversation here, they can digest on their own at their own speed. And I know you're always very generous with that kind of content. So
would you want me to throw some stuff up here and I can show them how to access it?
Yes, please.
Cool. So if you go to our website, smartboxdental.com, and then click here on the top where it says watch this week's Survive and Thrive webinar, scroll down here, there's a link. Click here for our complete repository of tools, articles, and resources.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, click here. And you can get everything we're using with our clients right now. So we've got a PPP loan organizer and calculator we've built. If you want to see how the PPP works, and there's no opt-ins here, Steve, instant access for everything, right? So if you want to see how do we make this PPP thing work, here's the directions. Come in here, plug your numbers in, and this spreadsheet will spit out how to make all this stuff work. If you want to see the new app for the PPP, the guidelines, the FFCRA paid sick leave update, we've got all this information right here. If you want to start to break down and understand the 5 A's for dentist or orthodontist, here's a great one. I'm getting asked all the time right now, should I lower my prices to attract patients back?
Okay.
Let me show you this. So we put this tool together. I'll show you how this works. This is really cool. What's an average profit margin that a dental practice has, Steve?
You're going to see, I think a good practice is going to be 35, 45%.
Cool. So we'll pick 40%. So if your profit margin is 40%, and you discount your price, let's say you think my prices are too high and I want to discount my prices by 10%. That means I need to see 25% more collections to make the exact same money. So Steve, do you want to work 25% harder to make the same money?
Yeah. And Colin, that is exactly the argument with maybe, one of the things here is PPOs. You know,
Oh, yeah.
take a hard look at those, because I don't think a lot of docs realize that when they take somebody on and your margin changes like this, you hit the nail on the head. You said it exactly. I've said it 1,000 times. How many more patients do you now need to see, or how much more production do you need to do to make the same money you made last year?
A 20 or 30% negotiated haircut is a lot more expensive than 5 to 8% on marketing. So now let's look at it the different way. What if we increase our prices? So you take this same 40% profit margin, but let's increase our prices 10%. That means we get to do 20% less collections to break even. So if we only lose 10% of our collections by raising our fees 10%, we actually made 10% more money than we made before. Profit, bottom line profit.
Right. And that's that argument to trim out the underperforming, maybe PPOs or insurance plans. Or yeah.
We're getting ready to launch a 6 steps to insurance independence guide.
Okay.
That should be out probably, I don't know, a few weeks maybe. We're in kind of the final stages on that. So, I mean, we got all kinds of stuff in here. I could talk about all this stuff. I mean, we had a doctor ask us, how do I defer my rent with my landlord? So we wrote him this rent deferment letter, and we just posted it here, right? So if they want to know how do I write my landlord a letter and defer rent? I mean, we just put everything in here that we can have to try to help dentists and lift up dentists during this time. We were talking a little bit earlier about how do I make the same money this year as I did last year?
Okay.
Here's the budget example. So if you want to go to the spreadsheet, this doctor had a $1.3 million practice, and they were on track to make about $586 this year, right? We built their COVID budget, so they're going to make $567 this year. Now that accounts for a 15 to 20% increase in collections for 4 to 6 months, as well as proper expense control and ramp up plan coming out of this crazy thing. So it's not just, hey, I close the office and then I reopen, oh, I'm going to make the same money. No, if that's the plan, you're going to take a big old haircut. If you ramp expenses down and you work with your vendors, get your rent deferred, all this stuff that's available, everybody's kind of in the same boat, right?
Right.
And it can happen. And this was the real numbers that we used from that particular doctor to show, you know, what was the budget going to look like? So
I like the letters. You know, I think, and I'm not a guy who likes to generalize, but I think when you've spent, say it this way, when you spent 4 years going to dental school, learning how to be a dentist, business conflict, calling somebody and saying, listen, I can't pay you for 3 months. Those are not things you learn. You want to hand that off to an office manager. So tools like the rent deferral, you know, you tell me, Colin, I have not had any situation where somebody reached out to a bank, to their, you know, the people who hold their car loan, to a landlord, to somebody that you don't have to explain what's going on. What do they say? You don't have to tell a bald man he's losing his hair. He already knows. We already know why you're calling, you know. So I've seen a really promising, positive, almost inspirational reaching out and saying, listen, we're just going to sit on this for, 90 days. And it really is fast and simple. And that letter, I think, is an amazing tool. That's exactly what we're looking for on this series, is a tool that a doc who doesn't want to have that conversation, doesn't want to make the call, but says, let me do this in a letter, and a landlord who says, listen, I just want to make sure I'm keeping a tenant.
There's no other tenants going to come in right now.
Right. Nobody's looking for that space.
I talked to a friend of mine that's the president of a local bank here in town. They had all of their loan officers proactively call every medical office they have, doctor, optometrist, dentist, ear, nose, and throat, everybody, and say, listen, we're going to put a 90-day hold on everything, principal and interest. How many of their existing customers do you think they're going to keep by doing that?
Right. People, they remember that. And I've always said that before, and you and I are business guys, and we go through things like this. And I do have a sort of a thing that I do where I'll tell somebody if it's a tough patch, I'll remember who stuck with me. And, when it comes back and times are good, that's when I'll remember it. So, your competition who was not so, they were kind of arm's length. I remember that. And somebody who was, what do they call it? They were down in the hole with me. I remember those people. So that's your bank. You should have that kind of relationship with your bank. And, back to your comment about the big companies got money first. Those are people who talk to their banks constantly. And that's sort of why. So if your banker can, if they've got X dollars to hand out and they can only call 20 of their clients, they're going to call the 20 at the top. And that's usually not the dentist.
Here's something I've been telling people. If you've read the news, you may have read where all the biggest companies in the United States and around the world maxed out their credit lines last month.
Yeah.
Every one of them drew down 100% on their credit lines.
Yes.
Banks love to give you an umbrella when it's shiny and clear outside. But as soon as it looks like it's going to rain, there's no bank that's going to loan you money.
Right.
And to top that off, from the 2008 recession, if you have a loan at the same place you have your deposit accounts, that bank can swipe your deposit accounts to cover your loan.
Right.
Nobody's going to know if you're in dire straits before you do. So if you're in dire straits, my advice, max out your credit line and put it in a bucket and move your operating accounts to a different bank from where your loan is at.
Yeah.
Now they can still, file for foreclosure, but they have to go through the whole process rather than just take it right out of your deposit account. So if that's you, get yourself in a position that you can weather this storm. The bank is going to do just fine through this storm. But worry about you. And if you got to move your accounts around or do something like that, I think that'd be really smart right now.
I agree. What do they say? A bank is eager to loan you money when you don't need it.
That can't be more true.
And so I've heard that exact strategy, and I may or may not have exercised a little bit of that, just because I don't know. And my background is management and finance, and the finance part of me says, if this dollar costs me $1.03, but it might save me $1.05, it's well worth that. So do the exact same thing. I mean, it's dollars.
Yeah.
So I agree wholeheartedly. Max out your credit line, move it to another bank. 30 days from now, put it back. No harm, no foul. Cost you a few bucks. Yeah. Don't spend it on something stupid.
Don't go buy a new boat.
Right. Now's not the time. But keep that cushion because you really don't know. So that's awesome. So where I'm looking here at the screen, it's smartboxdental.com. And all your resources. Once you go there, you get the little bar at the top, and all the resources are here.
Yep. Yeah. You just click there on the bar and it'll pull all this stuff up. And we're loading this thing up every week. We're adding new stuff in here. The myth of pent-up demand is something I think we talked about a lot today. So if you've got viewers that liked what we talked about, I've set up this direct link here.
Okay.
They can just pop out and type this in, and it'll take them straight to the myth of pent-up demand report. The theme I was going to use, have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The theme I was going to talk about was, everybody thinks that winter is here now. I don't think this is the winter. I think winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Yeah.
Winter, but it's not. It's going to be later this year when we have these on again, off again localities, and the ability for practices to be able to pivot very quickly is going to avoid the winter. And I think the winter's coming in Q3. I think mostly the bad stuff that's happened, guys have figured out how to survive it. But you're going to see Q3 is when the real bloodbath for another Game of Thrones deal. But so bit.ly/SB winter will take you straight to this myth of pent-up demand report here that we put together.
And we'll put that in a link below here in the show notes so you can go straight to it. SB Winter. They're telling me to make sure I write that down. Bit.ly, bit.ly. There you go. /SB Winter.
Yep.
And again,
I'll
that's
share it with you here, Steve, so you can have it here right here in your email.
awesome. That's what I like. Colin, you're like the technology guy, and
Steve,
that's one of the things I appreciate.
Do I not have your email in here?
Steve at.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. ProfitableDentist.com.
Perfect. There you go.
Awesome. So that, yeah, I appreciate that a ton. And it looks like you've got a whole, this is something that a practice owner who, talking about Game of Thrones, who has the choice between catching up on 3 years of Game of Thrones, or focusing on what they can do on their practice right now. Here are a lot of tools. There's no excuse with this to not find something you can be doing right now to position yourself to come back stronger, to be ready for a second round if a second round happens. And again, nobody knows. We all hope it doesn't. But if it does, it's better to be prepared for it than it is to, what do they say? There's 3 kinds of people. Ones who make things happen, ones who watch things happen, and ones who wonder what the hell happened. So be in that first group. Be somebody that, for your practice, make it happen rather than reacting or rather than being caught totally by surprise. So no, I appreciate that. All right. Any parting thoughts? Any words of wisdom from Colin Receveur?
I think I think the Warren Buffett thing is the way this is going to play out. I think those that show up the day they reopen, and if you build it, they will come approach. They're going to have a really, really difficult time figuring this thing out. Yeah. And they're going to have a lot of time on their hands because their chairs are going to be empty. So they're going to have the time to figure it out. Those guys that have prepared and have come into this thing thinking and realizing that, this COVID stuff is going to change the world, are going to really thrive. And they're going to be, the first mover advantage is in full swing here, Steve. There's going to be 1 or 2 or 5 in every market area that realize that there's a completely different message that patients want to hear. A completely different way of talking and communicating the practice's positioning. It's like 9/11. It's going to change the world. And those practices that can hit that nail on the head with that messaging are going to thrive. And they're going to attract the patients that are looking at it. Dentistry is not going away. There's a huge need. It's not going away. But there is going to be a significant amount of churn. Hygiene is going to take the first haircut. And if your restorative comes out of hygiene, that's also going to be something you need to figure out. So I'll shoot you. I've got these 10 questions here in an email. Okay. I'll shoot these 10 questions to you. And if you share these with your listeners, they ought to spend 15 minutes per question. Okay. I'm going to suggest they spend 10 questions, 15 minutes per question, and they really think about this. If they go through 10 questions in 15 or 30 minutes, they're probably just trying to check the box that somebody's telling them to do. If they want to get the value and really figure this thing out so they thrive on the other side, they need to pick up the business end of the shovel and do a little digging. And, I'll say that some of these questions are difficult. They're not easy questions to answer, but they're all open-ended. These aren't leading, there's no hidden agenda here. This is how are patients going to change after we come out of this and whatnot. So, we base everything, Steve, around the 5 A's: answer, appoint, attend, accept, and average. Okay. How are these 5 stages going to change when this thing's all over? Right? How are my patients going to respond differently? How do I need to appoint them? What's the safety and security plan to get them to come into the office? Fauci came out and said we may never shake hands again. Right. How are you going to build rapport and expert status if you got to stay 6 foot away from patients for the rest of your career? Patients, this handshake thing is one foot out of the grave.
Mhm.
I don't think handshakes are coming back. Maybe we'll do some elbow bumps or something, but I think some of this stuff, it's gonna fundamentally change how society interacts.
Mhm.
So.
And I think it's important that you don't get hung up on the crystal ball and, you know, knowing the answer, but just going through the exercise. So really, Colin, going through this exercise, you are the practice owner. You don't have to have the answer. You don't have to go to your team and say, okay, I've found the answer to these 10 things, which really is the opposite of where a dental school education takes you. Dental school education takes you to, there's one answer and here's the right one. In business, there's not. Should I do this? Should I grow? Should I shrink? Should I move down the street? Should I stay? All of those have variables. And what I always tell people is the right answer is they're all right, done the right way. So if you're doing what somebody else is doing and it's not working out, that's not for you.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't align with who you are. So the right answer is the one that's profitable and allows you to stay in business. And that really is outside of a dentist's to zone, a dentist practice owner's comfort zone. It's a million miles outside of their comfort zone right now. So I think you're right on. It's you know, now's the time to be the leader, to be the doc, to let people know you're the practice owner. You are the practice owner. This isn't something you can delegate to your office manager and practice manager and say, all right, you know, take these things, go read all this stuff that Colin put up there, and then figure out what we're going to do when we're going to come back, and I'm going to go cut the grass. You don't get to do that anymore.
In most cases, the doctor is the visionary.
Yes, or should be.
It should be. Yeah. And usually they are. They just may not currently have that hat on.
Yeah.
Like when they started the practice, they were the visionary. But then at some point, it kind of got replaced with the clinician hat.
Mm-hmm.
And the office manager culture hat kind of got lost somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, there's only one hat to wear, and that's the clinician hat. And what needs to happen is we got to take the clinician hat on and put the owner hat on, or put the culture leader hat on, whatever hat that is. And there's going to be a little bit of that uncomfortable feeling as we navigate through this. And the most important thing is we've got to realize, you got time for a story?
Yeah, and I know I was thinking I was trying to figure out where you were going to put in moving forward, because I love that. I believe that too. Always be moving forward.
I love fishing, and I love going to Alaska to fish. You've heard my stories.
Yeah.
So we're up there a couple years ago, and you know, you see, we're out remote. I mean, we're 6 hours by boat from Juneau, and canoeing up a creek, over the mountain on foot. I mean, we're super remote up there, and the guides, of course, all carry guns. I mean, some of them slung shotguns over their back. Some of them, our guide had a big old Smith & Wesson 500 on a big, like a Dirty Harry, you know, chest rig.
Right.
And I said to him one time, I said, is that really going to stop a bear if you shoot him? And there's bears. I mean, you're walking up the creek and there's a bear 20 feet in front of you. Big mama brown bear and 2 cubs come fumbling out of the woods. And he goes, I mean, just stone-faced, our guide, the gun's not to shoot the bear, Colin, it's to shoot you. I said, what the hell are you talking about? And he said, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
Right.
And the most important thing here is the bear's coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
If we freeze, we're going to die. We're going to be eaten. Mm-hmm. We're going to be eaten alive by our competition. If we try to fight the bear, you can't really fight COVID-19.
Right.
You can stand on a soapbox and say it ought, shoulda, coulda, woulda been this way, but the reality is it's just not. Mm-hmm. And that fighting the bear doesn't get you anywhere. So in reality, the only thing we can do is outrun our buddy, outrun the competition. This is what my advice to everybody is. How do we shoot our buddy in the leg so we can outrun him and the bear eats him?
There you go.
There we go. And
that's survival of the fittest right there.
And when I joked about, you know, the first mover advantage, that's really it. The first one to get back to the boat is going to thrive. Let's just make sure we're all the first ones to get back to the boat, and our competition is not.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, that, you know, whether we like it or not, it is, all business is competitive, and every day somebody wins and somebody loses. And you know, that's the whole reason behind, you know, both of our organizations. I mean, mine is to help practice owners. 8.5 out of 10 are who are dentists who went to dental school, not business school. Even if they did go to business school, you know, 50% of businesses fail every year.
Yeah.
You know, so odds are stacked against you in terms of your business. So help them get the tools to thrive, and I think we've done that today. You are, you know, a wealth of knowledge, one of the smartest guys I know, you know, and I think that's genetic, so you can pass that along to Ron.
And remember, why do businesses go out of business? There's only one reason: they run out of cash.
Right. Yep.
Once you spend that cash, it's gone forever. Mm-hmm. And understanding where you're burning cash, what your burn rate is. One of the tools in our resource deck is a cash burn calculator.
Okay.
I think every dentist ought to know down to the penny what their cash burn is and what are all the things that are going into this guy. Because once you're out of cash, you're out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Colin, I know we've gone over, but that's okay. You're always a wealth of knowledge and resources. And I really do appreciate, you know, the tools that you bring, and you're always generous with those kind of things. And I think, you know, I always feel like a rising tide lifts all ships. So, you know, people who are attracted to that, and you, I think, realize the kind of person you are and the organization you run. SmartBox Dental, been around for a long time. You build it from scratch and have done an amazing thing in the sole practitionership of dentistry. So I appreciate you being on today. I will post the links that Colin talked about. How would somebody get a hold of you email wise if they want to reach out to you?
My email address is colinr@smartboxdental.com.
Okay, good. There's that. And again, you know, practice owners, just reach out to us if you have any questions. We'll make sure you get in touch. You know, our role, I've always believed, is to take the practice owner audience and marry it with people who have really good ideas, that are smart about keeping your practice alive and thriving and profitable. So I think we've certainly done that today. So with that, Colin, we'll call this one to a close. So, any parting thoughts?
Keep moving forward.
I was waiting for that. And I agree wholeheartedly. There are people who ask me, you know, we talked earlier about a dentist who sent me a 3.5-page email with all these supporting facts and links and Fox News and CNN, got to the end and said, what do you think I should do? And my answer was, make a decision. That's what you should do. And I really mean that. I don't mean that flippantly, but you know, I can't make a decision. You can't make a decision. So I do love that. Keep moving forward. If you feel forward motion, you're probably doing the right thing. And if you make a bad decision, you know, don't do that again, but keep moving forward. So I was trying to tee up the keep moving forward part for you.
There we go. Always moving forward. Yep.
Practice owners, thanks for listening in. Till next time, we're signing off for The Profitable Dentist, coming back stronger. All right. You good with that?